Today we have a classic drive down the old Route 66. This will end up taking us to the little town of Oatman, Arizona. It's one of those drives where the journey there is just as exciting as the destination, and you'll soon find out why. Shortly after hopping onto Route 66, I didn't have to go too far before I saw something that caught my eye, so I stopped in to take a look. I looked up this rest stop online, and throughout the year it seems like it's mostly just a toilet on a wooden pallet, but I can appreciate the nice touch with the skeleton being that Halloween was right around the corner. I also talked to a couple that was here visiting from out of state, and as they were leaving, the gentleman pointed at the skeleton and said, "This is what happens when you don't shit or get off the pot." Wise words indeed. The portion of Route 66 that we'll be taking technically starts in Kingman, Arizona, and runs all the way to the Colorado River. However, for the sake of the video, we will be starting our journey right about here, and we'll be traversing through the Black Mountains before heading into the little town of Oatman. The road heading into the mountains was pretty smooth, and I tried to get my drone up in the air and have it follow me for a few minutes to showcase the surrounding landscapes, but the wind wasn't having it. It was a pretty nice day, partly cloudy here and there, but that wind was not letting up. Every time I tried to get a nice, smooth, consistent shot of the road or have it follow my car, the wind just pushed it off course and the footage was complete garbage. I did luck out and managed to snap a few decent clips of the unique rock formations in the area, but that didn't last too long. But that's okay, because this brings us to our first stop on Route 66. Cool Spring Station is one of those classic Route 66 roadside attractions. They definitely have their fair share of Route 66 souvenirs, along with a variety of other little trinkets. They also have a good selection of snacks and drinks for all of you weary travelers. This was my first time here, and when I got home, I started to look into its past, and I was surprised to learn that Cool Spring Station dates all the way back to the mid 1920s. Now, I could probably do an entire video just on the history itself, but in the spirit of time, here's a quick history lesson. Cool Spring Station opened in the mid 1920s and was a common stop for motorists coming both up and down the highway. And according to Route 66 CoolSpringsAZ.com, Cool Springs represented a life saving stop for early motorists to check for oil, water, gas, and grab a bite to eat. And in just a few moments here, when I show you the highway, you will see just why it was a life saving stop. Post World War II, as travel out to the west grew, and with the Route 66 becoming such a popular travel route, Cool Spring Station became a welcoming stop for travelers of all types. However, by the early 1950s, things took a literal turn for the worst. In 1952, the Route 66 alignment was changed, now running from Kingman, Arizona to Yucca, Arizona, bypassing the little town of Oatman and Cool Spring Station, essentially turning them into a ghost town. And by the 1960s, a fire burned Cool Springs to the ground, with only a few partial structures remaining. Cool Springs was nothing but ruins until about 40 years later, when a gentleman by the name of Ned Lechner, I hope I pronounced that correctly, he saw the place, became inspired, and eventually bought the property. He rebuilt it, and on December 7th, 2004, the power was back on. Aside from a brief close in the spring of 2016, it's been in operation ever since. And here's some old photos of Cool Spring Station over the years. These photos are from the website Route66CoolSpringsAZ.com. I'll also link that down in the description below. And if anybody watching this video has ever visited Cool Spring Station, whether it be recently or back in the day, feel free to share your memories with us down in the comment section below. I picked up some soda. I am a sucker for these things. So we have orange soda. Who loves orange soda? Kel loves orange soda. We have lime soda. And then we got grape soda. I absolutely love these Route 66 bottles. I have about 4 or 5 of these at home, and I use them to collect change. So I figured when in Rome, why not pick a few of them up? These are going to be gone within the next hour for sure. The drive up and through the Black Mountains to Sitgraves Pass is where things start to get really interesting, and you'll see why Cool Spring Station was such a vital stop for travelers. I broke out my drone, which is the DJI Mini 4 Pro, in case you're wondering, and I'll link that one down in the description. I set it to follow mode, and this is what I captured. The Oatman Highway, also known as Route 66 and Highway 10, is well known for being a narrow road with steep drop offs and many hairpin turns. Out of all the intimidating highways I've driven in the last year, this one really isn't that bad. They do have guardrails in most places, but in other areas, they do not. In just a few minutes, you'll see how there is about 2 feet of shoulder room between your car and the exposed cliff edges. And further up the road, you'll get a glimpse of another style of guardrails, which I wasn't quite expecting. As I made my way further up the mountains, I was quite surprised that my drone handled so well. It was still fairly windy, but nothing compared to the wind that I was experiencing before I entered the mountains. I was extremely lucky that the wind mellowed out as much as it did, because using a drone on a drive like this gives such a better perspective on how narrow the road is and how close you are to the edge. I still had my camera mounted on the dash just in case we encountered some unexpected gusts of wind, but because we weren't out in the open anymore and had plenty of blockage from our surroundings, it made for an incredibly smooth flight and drive. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that this was the original Route 66 alignment until 1952 when it was rerouted to Yucca, Arizona, which is present day Interstate 40. This direct route avoided all the twisty turns and steep grades and sped up the flow of traffic. But could you just imagine how much chaos there would be on this old road if the new alignment never happened? You'd get a mix of all the slow drivers, fast drivers, out of towners, Californians, not to mention all the trucks, RVs, and people pulling anything behind. It would be pure hell. But moving on. This section of road right here just goes to show you how little shoulder room there can be. This road didn't have me worried for even a split second, but then again, it only takes one split second to become distracted. And unlike the roads in the valley, if you were to get distracted, worst comes to worst, you'd end up in the ditch, way out in a field, or taking out a few mailboxes, depending on where you are. But if you veer off course on a road like this, it's going to send you rolling down the canyon for quite a distance. And full disclosure for the select few people that think I'm speeding around these curves, well, I'm not. I've simply sped up the video in the interest of time. But if you are someone who doesn't do well on roads like this, here is my advice. Take your time, go the speed limit, and in the words of Steve Stifler,
relax, take it slow, and let the good times roll.
Fun fact about Sean William Scott, aka Steve Stifler, he actually played college football with my high school history teacher. There's a thing you know. Now we are approaching the famous Sitgraves Pass, which is probably the most exciting part of the entire drive. Sitgraves Pass has some pretty stunning views, along with an elevation of 3,556 feet. And one thing I learned as I was putting this video together was that from here, you can see the 3 states of California, Nevada, and Arizona. I also found out that Sitgraves Pass was also part of an old wagon road that dates back to the 1850s, constructed by Edward Fitzgerald Beale. Now, as I continued down the mountain, I almost missed something with my eyes. Because it was standing so still, it just didn't stick out and grab my attention. Here's what I saw.
No way, there's one just on the side of the road. That is so cool.
As we're making our way down the mountain, if you focus your attention to the lower right of the screen, you can see the sort of jimmy-rigged road barrier on the side there. It kind of just looks like a bunch of concrete slapped onto a small wall of rocks. But hey, if it works, it works. Here's another view of the barrier from later on that night when I was heading back. I couldn't necessarily slow down because of traffic, but if you pause the video, you can make out some of the individual rocks. After I made it through the back to back switchbacks, I decided to hit the return to home button on my drone, just to give it a little break. And as I was landing, I made another pretty cool discovery. There were the remnants of an old mine not too far away, but I decided to hold off on that footage and save that video for another day. This video was filmed mid-October, and due to the clouds rolling in, I wasn't guaranteed much sunlight for the remainder of the evening, and I really wanted to get into Oatman to get some shots before the sun dipped behind the mountains and the ghosts came out. So I put the pedal to the metal and busted out these last few miles. And just like that, we finally made it to the tiny little Wild West town of Oatman, Arizona. Oatman, Arizona is an old mining town nestled along Route 66 that dates back to the early 1900s. Nowadays, it's quite popular for its Wild West tourist attractions and the abundance of wild burros that roam the streets. I'm not kidding, they were everywhere, and a couple of them even followed me around for a bit as I was walking around taking pictures and checking out all the little shops. This one even tried to make its way in. Hey buddy, you want some candy, don't you? You can just see the look on his or her face,
It's
like
her,
her.
yeah.
She's like, I just want to come in.
She's our oldest donkey. She's
Aw.
19.
Does she have a name?
April.
Oh, April? Okay. Nice to meet you, April. The wild burros were definitely the center of attention the entire time I was here, and they didn't seem too bothered by the presence of all the other tourists walking up and down the streets. They were quite friendly and extremely lovable. I think part of this was because, well, they wanted food. The wild burros have been a popular attraction here in Oatman for a long time, and I'm sure by now they've figured out a way to warm up to people and coax them into giving them a little nibble of their food. Oatman really took off as a town in 1915 after two miners struck a vein and ended up pulling out $10 million worth of gold. Cha-ching! One of the fascinating features that I absolutely love about this town is the wooden sidewalks. Kinda made me feel like I was in an old Wild West movie like Young Guns or The Quick and the Dead, which happens to be one of my favorite movies. Whoop, there goes another wild burro. After you. The building that you see here is the Oatman Hotel, and it was built in 1902. It was originally called the Derlin Hotel after its builder, John Derlin. In 1921, a fire broke out, destroying many smaller buildings in town, but thankfully, the Oatman Hotel was spared. According to echoesofthewest.com, it is the oldest two-story adobe structure in town and all of Mojave County. Unfortunately, on this trip, we were fighting daylight, so I didn't have ample time to explore much of the historic town like I wanted to. But let me know if you guys want me to come back again and explore more of the town. Make sure you tune back in next week for the video because I'll be traveling to a very unique part of the United States.
Oh my god!
And as always, if you want to continue the fun, click the video on the screen to check out my previous week's adventure.